Hello, I'm Justin Kelly from Alice Springs, Australia. Before my wife gave birth to my daughter, we were able to attend the birth of our neighbor. Her husband was out of the country for an extended period of time, and me and my wife wanted to help ease her burden as much as possible. From the start though, I thought the whole experience was rather interesting. Her labor was progressing at a fairly rapid pace, and being her second child, this isn't abnormal. But after only 1 hour of labor, her doctor started her on Pitocin, a drug which mimics the body's naturally produced oxytocin during birth. This immediately expanded her labor pains. Then, once she was 9 centimeters dilated, the OBGYN entered the room for the very first time. She gave birth lying down, and after 15 minutes postpartum, was removed from the room and her newborn baby to have a D&C performed to remove her placenta. To those who don't know any different, this sounds like a completely normal birth, but it shouldn't. That woman should not have been subjected to such an invasive experience. She didn't know it, but she had a choice, and you have a choice. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Had our neighbor used a midwife, the odds of intervention would have been dramatically reduced. But the use of midwives in the United States is highly discouraged. But we can change that. We can change that by educating new parents to the benefits of alternative birthing methods. So first, why me? Why would a man give a speech regarding the benefits of using a midwife during birth? To which I would respond, it is the duty of every father and partner to educate themselves on what mother-to-be will go through. So why not me? With that said, this was our midwife, Heather Ramsey. In 2011, when my daughter was born, Heather was a practicing certified nurse midwife at Bellevue Medical Center in Bellevue, Nebraska. Shortly after we had our child, certified nurse midwives at the hospital were removed. As it turns out, the hospital had a pre-standing policy that once midwives obtain 30% of the clientele, they are no longer welcome. But in order to allow women the continued choice that they had, Heather banded together with her now unemployed colleagues and established their own birthing center in Omaha, a move opposed by most local OBGYNs. Heather's story is not unique. Western medicine has a long history of oppressing midwives, often associated with witchcraft and barbaric traditions. It isn't hard to find materials such as this. OBGYNs sometimes try to scare you into associating midwives with home births and death. But just because you have a midwife doesn't mean you have a home birth. And just because you have a home birth doesn't mean that you're at any greater odds of having child death or complications than you're at a hospital. My wife had a midwife at the hospital with an OBGYN on call just in case of a life-threatening situation. So what's the issue between OBGYNs and midwives? Well, for starters, OBGYNs are trained to perform surgery. They're surgeons. They're not trained to observe a natural birth. In the documentary, The Business of Being Born, an interview of several OBGYN students and new practicing OBGYNs revealed that they had never been trained on what to do during a live natural birth. OBGYNs follow a checklist, typically. After a certain amount of time, they start the patient on Pitocin. Then the labor doesn't progress fast enough to perform a C-section or other invasive methods. As you can see here, midwives are 1/3 less likely to perform a C-section than the national average. As I stated previously, Pitocin is a drug which mimics the effects of naturally produced oxytocin. In an article printed by the ICPA titled Pitocin, the Whole Story, the author goes into detail as to the side effects with use of Pitocin and what those effects are on mother and baby, to name a few. For the mother, higher rate of complicated labor and deliveries, greater need for anesthetics, postpartum hemorrhage, and a higher rate of placental rupture and or separation, which is life-threatening for both mother and baby. For the baby, induction causes fetal distress, higher rate of jaundice, greater chance of prematurity, low APGAR scores at 5 minutes, premature permanent central nervous system and/or brain damage, and possibly even death. Neither induced or enhanced use of Pitocin, the blood supply, and therefore the oxygen source to the uterus is greatly reduced. With naturally paced contractions, there is a time interval between contractions allowing for the baby to be fully oxygenated for the next round of contractions. But with induced or stimulated labor, the contractions are closer together, more intense, and last for a longer period of time, therefore severely limiting the interval in which baby receives its oxygen supply. And everybody knows that a reduced oxygen supply could have a lifelong consequence on the baby's brain. So where does all this intervention lead us? According to the CIA World Factbook for infant mortality, the United States has 6.3 infant deaths per 1,000, compared to, say, the Netherlands, which has 3.4 deaths per 1,000. Compare this to a study titled The Safety at Home Birth, Is the Evidence Good Enough?, published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. The Netherlands use midwives in nearly 80% of the births, and over 1/3 of these births are at home. Then, even if you statistically compare the areas in the US where midwives are used more, birth complication is lower. In an article by the Times, an area in New Mexico where 24% of the births are overseen by a midwife, the highest in the country, also has the lowest rate of complications, C-sections, and fetal death in the country. This is an issue that cannot be ignored, but it is an issue that can be fixed. When a woman discovers she's with child, she shouldn't have to dig for information. It should just be there. Having more trained midwives and encouraging all low-risk pregnant women to at least talk to a midwife will decrease infant mortality and birth complications. You can help too. If you or someone you know is going to give birth, encourage them to seek out a certified nurse midwife, even if it's just to have a consultation. When individuals make informed, educated decisions, everyone benefits. I'm not saying that OBGYNs don't have their place. In fact, for a high-risk pregnancy, it is encouraged you have an OBGYN. And in the event of a severe actual complication, an OBGYN is needed to perform that surgery for a C-section. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the unnecessary use of those evasive tactics. If we choose to ignore this problem and maintain the status quo, more mothers will suffer unnecessarily, and more newborn infants will die because of unneeded evasive tactics. I hit you today with a lie. I told you the story of my neighbor's experience, discussed the condemnation of midwives in America, revealed the OBGYN's true training and purpose, debated the effects that the training has when it is unnecessarily used, and I told you what you can do to help. Whether you're a mom, a dad, a friend, a relative, a neighbor, or a sibling, we all know someone who will eventually give birth. And don't we owe it to them to ensure that they are armed with the information needed to have a safe and successful experience? Educate yourself, educate others, research your doctors and midwives. You have a choice.